my first experience of being a founder was being a international sports person, from the drive and ambition to the hours that you put in to get to that level of sport. And to be a founder, you have to have a sort of North Star.
Entrepreneurship is so overly glamorized, and it is hard work. It's so hard.
It is painful, but I think that really what all founders should learn to do.
Climate change is on the top of most, if not everyone's agenda. Why is Canopey not bigger?
Well, you clearly haven't looked at what we do.
You don't get more mission-driven than Canopey. So I wonder, does it hurt more when you face rejection?
A lot of bad shit happened. We got our first commitment, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, Silicon Valley tech bubble burst, recession on the cards, just like non-stop. So it's like, come at me.
In this episode, I interview Thomas Panton, the founder and CEO of Canopey, an online marketplace for sustainable goods. Thomas shares his background as an athletic swimmer and how that helped him become a better entrepreneur, how he raised funding when the idea was pre-product during an era of poly-crisis, and how he handled rejection after rejection, especially with a company that is so mission-driven. Thomas, honestly, to me, represents the quintessential entrepreneur. He's determined, resilient, a visionary, and a great public speaker. So I think you're really going to love this episode. Let's dive in. Thomas, welcome to the Strategy and Tragedy podcast.
Hello, nice to be here.
It's great to have you. I am particularly honoured to have you as my guest on this episode because you are an ex-athlete.
Yeah, you really want me to talk about that.
I really want you to talk about this. So we're going to dive into that. You're now the founder and CEO of Canopey, which is an online marketplace to help consumers shop for, learn about and track the impacts of sustainable products.
Yep.
Which sounds amazing. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey.
I bet. Well, this is why you're here today, to share more of that. But before we do, let's get into your athletic swimming path.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Question me. Yeah, no, I think it's actually, I always say to people that it's like my first experience of being a founder was being a international sports person, because there's so many similarities, from the drive and ambition to the hours that you put in, you know, to having to manage family relationships around all of that as well. There's so many similarities. And I think that I didn't really notice that until I was a founder later down the line. At the time as a swimmer, I thought like, oh, sports people only experience this. It's the only people. But you realize that it's quite a sort of like cross-sectoral.
What makes it so what are the main similarities that you've noticed between the athletic
stress? No, I think, in all honesty, I think the probably the most similar is just like to get to that level of sport and to be a founder of a company like Canopey, you have to have a sort of North Star that is your consistent goal, regardless of what happens, the highs, the lows, the middle bits, which are kind of grey and boring. And you're always set on reaching that absolute goal that you've set yourself. So when I was a swimmer, that was the Olympics and being an Olympic champion eventually, you know, that was always the aim. It never happened, by the way, but but that was the aim. And then
how far did you make it?
So I swam in international level. So that was international meets, open meets, nationals, regionals. My main career sort of through that was just in the UK, but then towards the end and sort of like in my highest peak, that was at sort of international competitions. But to be honest, I was mainly competing at that level from the age of sort of like 14 to 17, and then I got injured. Tried to, tell myself that I could keep going and push it. Another similarity as a founder, you come up against a challenge, you just like keep pushing through. But the thing with an injury is that you can't really push through an injury. And by doing that, it created sort of a toxic culture in the pool and all sorts of other things, which actually led to me quitting. But I think that, going back to that initial question, when thinking about where I wanted to be as a swimmer, as a sports person, and what my life would be around that, and sort of what I'd need to commit to it outside of that, do I need to go to uni, do all of these sort of questions. It's the same thing as a founder. I always consider, should I keep my eye on like job boards? Like, is that something I should do? And actually, you don't do that because you're just fully committed 100% to what you've chosen to do. It's the most similar thing, I think.
To your own path.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it must have taught you just so much in terms of, we were just saying before about structure, determination, just self-discipline as well to keep going? Because there must be, especially peak of winter, cold and dark, the last thing you feel like doing is...
Yeah, getting up at like 4:30 in the morning on the shortest day of the year is hell. And then having to sort of like jump into a car wrapped in a blanket and get, your parents to drive you to a swimming pool. And it's just, no one wants to be doing that, but you do it. And I think...
Why did you do it? What got you what made you get out of bed and make it happen?
It's a really good question. I don't think I really have like a straight answer to it. So when I started swimming, my parents wanted me to swim from a young age so that if we went on holiday, they could like let me go in the sea and I didn't have to worry because I was a good swimmer and all of this stuff. And I think that through that, I just got more and more into it, started competing, worked out I was quite good at it. And I think it just sort of happened. Like everyone always talks about sort of what was the light bulb moment of being a founder, what was the light bulb moment where you wanted to be a sports person, all of this sort of thing. I don't think it really happens like that a lot of the time. With swimming, it was definitely, it just happened. My parents never pressured me to do it. They obviously wanted me to be a good swimmer for holiday, but they never thought I'd be swimming at the level I did. And I think that the thing that kept me going was that when you're good at something and you get rewarded for your actions, so with swimming, that was winning a competition or improving on your personal best or, knowing that you are just the best at something is quite validating and it's quite an ego boost. But if you can manage that ego, it can be just make you quite confident and willing to just keep going. So I think that was really it. You get those highs and don't get me wrong, like through that, there were an equal, if not more amount of lows where didn't win, did rubbish, had a horrible time training, didn't go training, whatever it was. And I think that it's very easy to quit in those moments. And you see it a lot in sport, particularly in teenage. You see a lot of teenagers who become very good athletes and then get to like 16, their friends start partying, they start sort of wanting to go to those parties, and then they sort of like, well, why am I swimming? I'm missing out on all my friend stuff. And it's quite easy to quit. You see so many people drop off. And you just have to be, quite headstrong not to do that.
Yeah, and that's so interesting just to hold that thought for a moment around the winning, the losing as well. I'm glad that you mentioned that because, the definition of burnout is when you're continually working away and not getting the reward out of it. You're not getting that satisfaction. So I guess just like thinking out loud, do you think that you said that there were kind of just as many losses as there were wins. Do you think it kind of needs to be like 50, whether it's in athleticism or entrepreneurship, in order you're not going to win them all, but like to have enough wins to keep you going? Like, do you think there needs to be like an equal amount?
It's interesting.
Just to ponder on, right?
Yeah, I think that. So I'm someone who works on sort of positive reinforcement. If I'm not doing well at something, instead of telling me I'm rubbish, or telling me that it's wrong outright and there's no sort of like follow on to that, I'm much better at sort of like, this wasn't working, here's how you can improve, we'd love to see you get to here, or I'd love to get you to there. And so having coaches around you can do that, turn a loss into a win because you learn from it. So I think that you probably do need those, but it's how you manage those. Like, I think that actually, if you were consistently winning, you wouldn't appreciate the wins like a lot of the time. And I think we see that quite a lot with successful founders, is that they like really successful, multiple exits, they've sort of made it, and then they sort of forget what it is to not make it. And they sort of tell people like all of this stuff about like your mental well-being and like remembering. And it's like, yeah, easy for you to say, dude, like you're not going through it now. You've been there though. So let's just remember that. I think that actually for those like in those trenches, you really appreciate the wins and it keeps you going because you can get to the next one. And if you can't, and if you have to stop, it's not like stop and you've like lost all of that experience. It's stop and you learn from it and then you go on to whatever is next, whether it's being a founder again or whether it's going and working the best in a different life. It's all about how you learn from that loss. And similarly, when I quit swimming, it wasn't going, although there was a period where it was like, well, what the fuck do I do now? But after that, it was like, okay, how do I take everything I've learned from this determination, ambition, stress, pressure from other people, and how do I put that into doing something good and driving that forward?
Yeah, oh my God, I love that. That is such a great answer. For a question that was completely unprepared, that was I couldn't wish for a better answer on that. It makes a lot of sense. It's just really interesting just because again, one of the basis of this podcast is that entrepreneurship is so overly glamorized, and it is fucking hard work. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I just see, whether it's my own businesses or vicariously through the entrepreneurs that we work with, it's just, getting those wins. I guess, there's one part of it, which is how you define those wins. I'm the same as you in terms of positive reinforcement, but you're just like, rejection after rejection. You just, especially if you haven't got product market fit and you're trying to make it work, it's a hard slog.
I also think that like there seems to have been this huge move of like everyone should hustle, everyone should be a founder at some point. You need to experience being a founder, like going and interviewing people in the street who are quite happy with their jobs and being like, I'm going to give you this money to go start your own business. And it's like, what if they don't, people might turn around and go, I don't want to start my own business. And then we judge them for that. And it's like, well, actually probably smart to say no. Starting a business is hard, and if you are comfortable and happy doing what you do, then stick with it. Like, you don't need to be a founder, you don't need to start a business. And I think also what's glamorized is the idea of being a startup founder and we forget that being a founder doesn't necessarily mean being a startup founder. It could be just starting a small business or a side business. And that doesn't have to be aiming to be a unicorn or a decacorn, right? Like, you could literally just want to provide for your family, live comfortably, even just have a side income alongside your other job. And that's all perfectly reasonable. And like, that's okay. And you don't have to like aim to be this like Steve Jobs guy. I think that we really glamorize that part. Like, it's the end bit. Like, you could be like this, and very rarely are you going to end up there. And very, very rarely is it right for everyone, if not even for a small percentage of people. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's the glamorization of this thing, which is hard, but also not right, for every single person. I wouldn't go and tell everyone, go and start training and be an Olympic swimmer. Like, it's like, why? Like, you might not want to do that. It might not be in their genes, whatever it is. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, spot on. Great answer. Total mic drop moment there. But done. That's it.
Done. We're finished now. Thanks, guys.
No, fantastic. So segueing on from your athletic past into entrepreneurship. So when did you found Canopey?
So Canopey really started sort of when my first business collapsed. So to give some context to this, when I quit swimming, I sort of took a year and went and worked in Levi's and was just like tailoring jeans and was like, what the hell do I want to do with my life? I quite enjoy being around sort of business, and my dad has his own business, and it's like, well, maybe I should do that. But it was never really an intention. And all my friends had gone to uni. So I was like, I'll go to uni. And I just sort of like went to a course which sounded interesting. No idea whether I would actually enjoy it. But when I was there, so I went and studied international relations and politics. And when I was there, I was learning about so many global issues and the interconnectedness between business, society, government, all of this stuff. Very interesting. But actually, the most interesting part was the people I met around that degree. And one of those people worked for Greenpeace. So instantly fell in love with the idea of using people power to change sort of status quo. We've seen it through history. I wrote my dissertation in my undergrad about anarcho-communism, which basically just like the idea that capitalism doesn't have to be the only way of working, and there are lots of other societies which would work. Anyway, bit of a tangent to get to the point that when I was working for Greenpeace, I really found my passion in working in the climate sector and using people power and getting people involved in doing something good and feeling good about doing something good is perfectly okay, even if that's your only intention for doing the good thing. So out of that, just sort of like kept working in the sector, set up my first business out of Greenpeace, stupidly, but without knowing, in the event sector, and pandemic killed it. But that was when it was like, okay, well, I don't want to stop being a founder now. I've got the taste. This is what I love doing. It reminds me of being a swimmer. I really enjoy the stress, but I also really enjoy having like an ambitious goal. And we were sort of stood in a field of sort of plastic waste, and we'd spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses trying to build better products. I'd spoke to tens of thousands of people to onboard them into the climate movement. And there's this huge barrier between people trying to do better and the ability to do so, and the businesses trying to make it easier to do so. So literally just sat in that field, went to my now co-founder and just, was like, let's take down Amazon and let's build a sort of like the place to go and buy for sustainable products. So I was in that field, and that was probably in 2019 was when that thoughts first started coming out, and then we went and started building from there. We didn't start, incorporate the company until a couple of years later, but that was really the seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing. And so tell us about Canopey itself then. So it's an online marketplace, but it goes beyond simply shopping for ethical goods.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that particularly I knew about the sort of climate movement or the ability to live more sustainably from a consumer's perspective was that it's really complicated to do so. There are multiple different platforms, multiple different user journeys. You've got to go and learn about what swaps you can make. You've got to verify the claims that those brands are making to make sure that you don't buy something which you think has no plastic in. It has plastic in, all of these things. Then you've got to actually find someone to buy the products, right? And trust that all that work's done for you. And then you've got to sort of, if you can be bothered, to track your impact and know how much impact you're having and whether you could do better and all this thing. It's too hard. And even for someone who has worked in the sector my whole career, I deeply, passionately care about how we're impacting the climate. I find that too difficult. And I, as a consumer, wouldn't go down that journey. So Canopey was really set up with the idea that if we could remove those barriers and we could make it as easy to choose that option as to go to just a mainstream platform and buy whatever, then we have a much better chance at getting the majority of the population, rather than just the eco-warrior, to shop sustainably and live more sustainably. So Canopey does that. Canopey is the only platform which completely streamlines those different journeys into one platform. So yes, it's a marketplace. You could go there and you could buy as you normally would. But also, we've verified claims for a really strict vetting process. We've added so much educational content and learning. In fact, part of our platform could even be considered EdTech just through the platforming that we've built. And then on top of that, you're able to see the carbon emissions, the water waste, and the plastic waste that you're saving when you make that purchase compared to the mainstream alternative. All in one platform, one user journey. You don't need to go anywhere else. You're rewarded for those actions. It's super easy to use. And that just makes it so much easier for everyone to be able to buy better.
It sounds amazing. And this fantastic, like all in one place, streamlined online destination, coupled with the fact that climate change is on the top of most, if not everyone's agenda. We've just come off the back of like the wettest July I've ever known. We've got wildfires happening left, right and centre. Temperatures are rising. Why is Canopey not bigger?
We've just started. I think that we're ambitious. We think that there have been a number of shops which have sort of like provided ethical goods. But we've come to a point now in sort of society where you can't just claim something. We need to see the evidence for that. We need to know, we need to be able to trust. We need to give trust back to the consumer. The climate movement has done so well at sort of talking about the problems, the issues of the climate crisis. What it hasn't done so well is providing solutions for your everyday person.
Yeah.
So we've spent, the last 5 decades really telling everyone how bad the world is going to get and how much of a problem this will be if we don't change something. But we haven't given many solutions. We've done well at providing solutions for businesses and governments, but we've really struggled with consumers. So I think that Canopey, if we can do what we say we're going to do, and the fact that we've got the tech to back that up and the platforming to do it, naturally businesses pivot. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is it, we've made it, but I think that we've got a stronger chance at bringing more people into that than ever before, just simply because we've made it easier than ever before. For the entirety of human existence, we have innovated for the convenience that we now have today, and we can continue to innovate to give more convenience to people. If you ask people to go back and give back that convenience for whatever, moral or not, it's very, very hard to convince.
It's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would argue that it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Much of the climate movement would disagree with me that we need to give up that convenience. I actually take a controversial opinion that I think that we can have even more convenience, but we can use better business and better tech to be able to solve the problems that we're faced with today. So for Canopey, it's not about going, you bad consumer, give up all of this stuff and be better. It's going, no, keep going. We're going to make it even easier for you, but actually you're going to be able to trust us that this is going to be quantifiably better than anything you've bought before for the planet, for people, and for your wallet as well, ultimately.
Yes, this is so inspiring. I feel like I want to join Greenpeace.
Go for it. They need more people.
I love hearing you talk about it. quick fun fact. Did you know that the annual spend on outsourcing and hiring agencies is $900 billion this year alone? That's why I'm so proud to collaborate with 50pros.com, a new and fast-growing platform that connects highly vetted agencies with companies looking for their next marketing partner. If you've ever had to source your own agency before, then you'll know unless you've had a good referral, it can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. That's why with 50pros.com, they provide you with a curated, vetted, no-noise directory of only the top 50 firms within 50 categories. Head to the link in the show notes, 50pros.com, and I really hope this helps you get it right with your next marketing partner. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah.
It's so, it's like that saying, the discomfort of change needs to be greater than that of convenience, or whichever way around it is.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, in order to make a change, you've got to come out of your routine, what you're used to, the usual places you shop. So I think you've completely got the right idea about it in terms of making it as easy as possible, as convenient as possible, because you need to lubricate that adoption to make it happen. Because I think these guys that you're talking about, they are focused on people like them, the eco warriors, the ones who are already bought into it, the ones who are. But as you say, you need that mass adoption to make a change.
Having a very niche part of the consumer market, despite that growing, more and more people are involved with climate action, and more people are supporting the groups that are pressuring governments and pressuring businesses to change. More and more of us are spending our money supporting better businesses. But despite that, the likelihood is that those people are doing that because it's become easy for them to do those things. They found a way in which that fits in with the other things that they've got going in life. Family troubles, money troubles, energy cost, whatever it is. And I think that if we can slot in the ability to use Canopey rather than using something like Amazon or whatever it is, then you just provide much more of a pathway to adoption than simply going, radically change your life overnight, because it's just not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen, in my opinion. I also think that through the 80s and 90s, there was this sort of like huge amount of writing and art about sort of like utopian green society. You'd see these like really futuristic cities and transport that were running off like clean, renewable energy. There were lots of plants. It was very green, like in color. And I think that why did we lose that when we talk about the climate, like when we talk about solutions to the climate crisis? Now, when people talk about solutions to the climate crisis, we think of like, oh, we need to be like cavemen. Oh, we need to like give up all of this stuff. Oh, we can't ever drive. We can't ever fly. Like, why? Like, why can't we move towards that utopian idea, giving the ability for people to live the way they want to, if not even more conveniently, but with the move and again, that North Star, that drive to get to this sort of society where we live sort of in harmony with the surrounding nature and natural world that we live upon. I think that's a much better way to encourage people to get involved. Also, I'd much rather live in a world like that than be a caveman. So however much, cut wood and stuff, great fun, but, it's not really what I want to do my whole life.
What's your stance on either, the bigger countries, China, these huge powers that are polluting the world, the bigger corporates? Just bearing in mind, obviously, with Canopey, you're focused on the consumer and encouraging some of that behavior change and giving them better options. But there is this tug of war between who has the power. Is it the mass market? Is it the consumers? Or is it these big corporations and big countries that are really responsible for this huge...
So there's three things that I'm going to say. The first is that doesn't matter. Like, firstly, like if we just didn't change anything and we decided that our 2% of global emissions was completely irrelevant, so therefore we didn't change anything ever, and every other country did, then we would end up being more polluting than everyone else. So there's no argument there, because we should all be moving towards that better world. The second is that you're absolutely right. Big corporations and big countries obviously have more of an impact than sort of the individual person sat in the UK. Well, I'm going to come back onto this, but have more of an impact from a sort of like global emissions perspective. However, like, again, a lot of this is coming down to the impact that we demand. So like what we are asking for from other countries has an impact on those countries' own emissions. The third thing I'd say is that like actually data-wise, China is pushing further ahead than any other country on the world on transition to renewable energy. Despite their coal stations and coal mining, they're still further ahead on implementing renewables. And secondly to that is that their historic emissions, if you can count in the historic emissions of countries, the UK, the US and Europe are by far the biggest culprits when it comes to what we've done to the planet. And thirdly to that is that actually more of China's emissions come from their exporting from the demand of Western countries than China's internal demand from their own population. And if you looked at the emissions per capita, so per person in the country, US, UK, far worse than China. And actually, the worst countries in the world are the oil polluting countries. They're not very populated, and they've got huge oil industry, right? Like Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Like they've got small populations. Their economy is built on oil. So per capita, each person's own amount of emissions that is accounted to them is ridiculously high, right? It's not a very good representation of like what the world is and who's demanding that oil. The US and the UK and Europe are, of course. So I think that it's a complicated topic. And actually, I just go back to that very first point that I made, which is that it shouldn't really matter. We should all be moving towards that change so that the whole world lives in a better way, not just like, well, let's get China to change first and then we'll change. Well, actually, it doesn't really matter. We should all be making that transition.
That is such a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. Most startups have a clear mission.
Yeah.
We talk about having purpose, clear mission, especially from a marketing perspective. Yeah. I mean, you don't get more mission driven than Canopey. So I wonder, does it hurt more when you face rejection? Because it's bad enough to just feel rejection anyway on a human level. But as a founder, it's hard to not take it personally when it's your own business, you're in the early stages. And then when it's also goes beyond you, your team, your business, it's that wider mission, that cause that you're fighting for. Yeah. And I know for a fact you still get investors turning you down. Yeah. What does that feel like for you?
I think there's two parts which are hardest. Is one, yes, from the individual perspective, it's of course difficult, and tying into that the fact that this is a solution to a huge problem which whoever you are, investor, you are going to experience, right? So it's like, why wouldn't you support those solutions is one question. However, I know I'm not so naive to think that that's all that goes into investment. And I appreciate that it's capital return and there's so many other questions around competitors and market size and all the rest of the stuff. So I'm very aware of that. So when that side of rejection happens, it's the initial thought is like, well, you should be backing these things. But then the second thought is, but why not us? And what are the reasons around that? And then, so it becomes less of a personal attack and more of just like, okay, how do we move and convince people and change? So I'm less concerned about the personal side. The side which frustrates me most is when we get rejection is the sort of standardization of climate solutions. It's like, oh, there have been other ethical marketplaces. Well, you clearly haven't looked at what we do then, because no one does what we do. Like, yes, the model is marketplace, correct. But do any of them verify the claims? No. Do any of them allow you to track your impact, get rewarded for it, share it, come back, sticky platform? No. So it's like, how much have you actually looked at what we do? That's the initial reaction. And then the second reaction is, why didn't they see what we actually do? Did we not relay that properly? How can we change our proposition so people see that instantly and go, I get it. This is different. This is innovative. This is a solution. So it is painful. But I think that really what all founders should learn to do is not take that personally. The first thing is, of course, going to be a hit. But then you just have to sort of like work out why that response came. In some cases, it is just going to be shit. And like those people, you're just going to not agree with, and you've just got to accept that. In other cases, there's a likelihood that you probably haven't relayed what you do properly. And that's been a huge learning curve for us. Raising our pre-seed round sort of into this year, but really started last year, and doing that pre-product on the market, pre-revenue. We had traction in other ways, but there was nothing to see tangible for investors. Like, I totally get why we got so many no's. If I was just telling someone what we do, it sounds great, but like from the model perspective, it's just a marketplace, right? So I get it. Whereas now, like, we have a product on the market which people can see, we can relay those properly. We've refined how we talk about what we do. As I said, you know, when you sent me over sort of like what you wanted to talk about, I came back and said, well, actually, one of the things which is really important is that we talk about streamlining the user journey, because nowhere else does that. And that is what is unique to Canopey. So if we refine these things, I get more confident at being able to raise money again and keep that going. I think just to finish that sort of long-winded answer off, I think that one of the things that is quite difficult just generally is sort of going back to your point about it being your baby, like you've put so much time, and it's when you get repetitive no's that you become less sort of like, you care less about the reason and you just sort of hear the no. So in the first instance, the first few no's, you're sort of like, okay, but why? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then like after like 100, it's like, okay, like, I don't know if I want to hear a no again. But yeah, again, you sort of pick yourself up at that. I know after our pre-seed round, I went through like a month of just feeling like really shit, like really, really crap. And even though we'd closed the round, it should be the happiest point, right? I felt terrible. I wanted to raise more. I wanted more people backing us. I'd heard no's from people I really respected. And it was just like quite demoralizing. But about, you know, a month after that, we had our next small win, and it was like, oh, fuck yeah, like, let's go again. Like, I can do this. I'm going to raise more money. And so instantly it sort of like cancels it all out and you just get going again.
Amazing. And it links back to what we were talking about earlier with the wins and the losses. And you need it, because it is grueling. It's hard, it's horrible. It feels horrible. You feel it emotionally. And you say, you know, a month later, you did get a win. But, you know, if you hadn't, it's like, well, how much longer do those reserves need to keep getting you through? Yeah. But no, honestly, Thomas, big congratulations, not only on Canopey, which is obviously amazing, but securing your fundraise, like you just described, you know, during a time where it was pre-product, pre-revenue, you did well.
A hell landscape to raise investment.
Yeah, all of the above, right?
We got our first commitment, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, Silicon Valley tech bubble burst, the cost of energy crisis in the UK was sort of announced and then started sort of coming and hitting the real person. Then it was like recession on the cards, so everyone was a bit nervous. And then like all of these other ethical businesses started closing because of challenges in the market. And it was just like every month was like something new. And it was every month like talking to investors who we thought were going to invest, who turned around and go, wow, this has changed in the market. We're going to invest in our own companies, going to play it safe. And it was like,
you couldn't make it up,
just like non-stop. So anyone who raised money, regardless of what stage they're at, I'm super impressed with and proud to call them like founders in the market, because they've just done amazingly well.
Absolutely. No, well done. Are you able to share how much you managed to close?
So we raised just under 300k.
Wow.
Which was fine. We could do everything we want to do with that money. We're sort of preparing for our seed round now, right? So that seed round is planned for sort of opening in December-ish, and then but really through Q1 in 2024. And we've started to sort of have those conversations and peak interest, and instantly I can tell you, having a product that people can see makes so much difference. Like I just get like so much better response instantly. I haven't even opened the round yet. We haven't even really got to the point where we're talking about the raise. It's just like instantly when I talk to people, oh, we've got a seed round coming, they're like, let's talk. And I'm just like, why didn't I just like get something like and just make it up? Like, this is the product.
Create a video of it. Yeah. Put it on.
This is the thing. Like, we had demos, but I think what's the difference? And people talk about this, right? Like, get a product out on the market, get an MVP out, like, or have a product demo or whatever. And I get that argument, like, totally do, and it does make a difference. But I think the real difference for us, like from now to when we were raising sort of on demo videos, is actually the fact that they can just go and use like something which is complete. Like, there's always going to be new things that we're adding, right? Like, and as I said, we'll probably pivot at some point, like no doubt. But the point is that what we had planned to build is built. So when people go and use it, they get that full user experience now. And that's very different from a demo video or an MVP. So I think that actually, like, I'm very, very lucky that we're at the point where the money that we raised will allow us to do what we need to get to the next round, but actually we can actually have our product out on the market and people can use it and feel it and give feedback and we can improve it. And God, it's just such a nice feeling.
Oh, amazing. I'm so happy for you. Actually getting people to use it for themselves, experiencing it for themselves makes all the difference.
Huge difference.
Thomas, you've been such a fantastic guest. I have a final question for you. I believe that the biggest lessons come from the worst things that happen to us, hence strategy and tragedy.
Yeah.
Can you open up about something pretty horrific that's happened and the lesson that it's taught you and how you've kind of come back stronger than before?
Yeah, wow. Ending for everyone to have like a raw response. I think that we've spoken a lot about swimming, and obviously that was a big part of my life for my whole teenage years growing up, right? So the easy answer would be to go back to that and talk about how I always thought I was going to just swim and all of those things. But actually, I think the hardest thing that happened and the biggest lesson I learned was when I was going through my swimming career, I was also experiencing quite severe mental health challenges as a teenager, and at the time didn't think that they were mental health challenges, just thought that it was because of swimming and being in a high pressure environment and all of these things. Only when I stopped swimming and then went through this grey period of not knowing what to do in my life was when it really, really got bad. And I think that's when I first got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It's when I first started having therapy and counselling, and a lot of bad shit happened from the age of sort of like 18 to like 24, which isn't that long ago. And it was just like really, really hell for me, my family, for everyone around me. And there were good points within that. I think, everyone talks about mental health as if like when you've got mental health problems, it's shit all the time. Not true. You have a pretty normal life, but there are just some really bad points. And I think that the reason I mention that is because where I'm at today is so different. Like, I still have borderline personality disorder. I'll live with that my whole life. But the lesson of learning to deal with that and going through those challenges and difficulties, having people around you who you can talk to, losing people because you didn't manage it correctly, all of that stuff, like you begin to create a bank of different ways of dealing with challenges, not just with mental health, but just generally. So now when we're, a startup and we're going through challenges in a company, going through challenges in personal life, whatever it is, I feel so just like overwhelmingly prepared for those things because I've already experienced the shittest it could get. So it's like, come at me, like, what are you going to do? Like, you can't make it worse than it was. So everything is going to be a challenge, sure, but like I can manage, I can take it. Like, I can take literally anything that's thrown at me. If Canopey fails, it's going to be shit, but there'll be another thing that happens after Canopey because I know how to deal with failure. That's what I learned from having that horrible time at the beginning of my 20s, but I'm really glad that I experienced it now.
Oh my God, amazing. Thomas, you've been such a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for coming on. I know that you talk more about this on the Big Risk Energy podcast, so shout out to Roy Samuel and that. Give that a listen, where I know that you talk a bit more about mental health and other really interesting themes around meditation, spirituality. So listen to that episode separately. Thomas, thank you so much again. You've been wonderful.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. If you made it this far into the podcast, then you are my new hero. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Take care.